America shares a 2,000-mile border with Mexico. 30 million Americans visit every year. And almost everything Americans think they know about Mexico is completely wrong. By the end of this video, you will realize that the neighbor you thought you knew has been hiding one of the most extraordinary, most ancient, and most culturally rich civilizations on Earth, right next door. Mexico is not the country of beaches and cartel news coverage that Western media has spent decades presenting to the world. Mexico invented chocolate, built cities larger than anything in medieval Europe, has more UNESCO World Heritage Sites than the United Kingdom, and has a food culture so extraordinary the United Nations gave it protected status as irreplaceable cultural heritage of all humanity. Mexico City is one of the largest cities on Earth with over 21 million people, larger than New York, larger than Los Angeles, larger than any city in the United States. Mexico City alone contains more people than the entire population of the state of New York, which immediately destroys the idea that Mexico is a small country. Mexico City sits at over 2,200 meters above sea level, higher than Denver, Colorado, and is also slowly sinking into the soft lakebed sediment it was built on at up to 40 centimeters per year in some areas. Mexico built its capital on a drained ancient lake. The lake is reclaiming its territory. And 21 million people live there enthusiastically anyway. Mexico is the 11th most populous country on Earth with approximately 130 million people, larger than Japan, larger than Germany, larger than the United Kingdom. Mexico is also the largest Spanish-speaking country on Earth, which surprises people who assume that distinction belongs to Spain. The ancient city of Teotihuacan outside Mexico City was at its peak around 450 CE, one of the largest cities in the entire world, with a population estimated between 100 and 200,000 people. Medieval London at its peak had 50,000 people. Mexico had cities 4 times that size before Europe emerged from the Dark Ages. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan in Mexico is the 3rd largest pyramid on Earth by volume, standing over 65 meters tall and built without metal tools, without the wheel, and without draft animals. Mexico constructed this structure with a geometric precision that continues to astonish modern engineers 2,000 years later. Mexico has more UNESCO World Heritage Sites than the United Kingdom, a country that once ruled a quarter of the entire world. The country most Americans associate with resort beaches has more officially recognized sites of global cultural significance than Britain, and that single fact restructures the entire conversation about Mexico. The ancient Maya civilization developed and flourished across what is now southern Mexico, producing a writing system, a mathematical system that independently invented the concept of zero, and an astronomical calendar accurate to within minutes of modern scientific measurements. Mexico's ancient astronomers achieved this precision using only naked eye observation and mathematical reasoning, without telescopes, without computers, and without any tools that modern science takes for granted. Mexico invented chocolate. The Olmec civilization of Mexico was consuming cacao drinks over 3,000 years ago, and when Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found a sophisticated chocolate culture with specific preparation techniques and deep cultural significance built around cacao. Mexico gave the world its favorite food, and the world gave Mexico almost none of the credit. Mexico also gave the world vanilla, chili peppers, tomatoes, corn, and avocado, meaning Mexico is directly responsible for guacamole, salsa, chocolate, tomato sauce, popcorn, and vanilla ice cream. Remove every ingredient that originated in Mexico from global cuisine, and Italian food loses its tomatoes. Indian food loses its chilies, and a world without chocolate exists that does not bear thinking about. Mexico's food culture has UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage status, one of only a handful of food traditions in the world to receive this recognition. The United Nations declared that Mexico's food culture is part of the irreplaceable heritage of all humanity and that losing it would be a loss for the entire world. Mole from Mexico's state of Oaxaca contains over 30 individual ingredients, including multiple varieties of dried chili, dark chocolate, nuts, seeds, and spices that are toasted separately and slow-cooked together for hours. Mexico's mole negro is considered by serious food writers to be one of the most complex and sophisticated sauces in any cuisine anywhere on Earth. Oaxaca in southern Mexico has a food culture so rich and celebrated that serious food travelers regularly describe it as one of the great undiscovered culinary capitals of the world. Mexico's Oaxaca produces tlayudas quesillo cheese pulled by hand into long ribbons, and chapulines, roasted grasshoppers eaten as protein-rich snacks that have been consumed in Mexico for thousands of years. Tacos al pastor, perhaps Mexico City's most beloved street food, have their origin in Lebanese immigration to Mexico in the early 20th century. Lebanese immigrants brought their shawarma technique to Mexico, and Mexico took that method, applied it to marinated pork with pineapple and local spices, and created something so completely its own that most people have no idea where it came from. Mexico City's street food scene operates 24 hours a day with a variety and quality that serious food writers consistently rank among the best urban street food experiences on Earth. Mexico's capital has taco stands operating from the same corner for decades, tamale vendors using their grandmother's recipe, and market stalls producing regional dishes from across Mexico's 31 states. Mexico has laws that will genuinely surprise every viewer. In Mexico City, it is legal to ride a bicycle naked. Not because there is a specific law permitting it, but because Mexico City looked at naked cycling and decided it required no legislation, producing an annual naked bike ride through the capital attended by thousands of participants. Mexico has only one legal gun store in the entire country of 130 million people, located on a military base in Mexico City and operated by the Mexican Army. To legally purchase a firearm in Mexico, you must visit this single store, pass extensive background checks, provide documentation of your profession and reasons for ownership, and receive government approval. Mexico has a constitutional provision called the Calvo Clause, preventing foreign nationals from appealing to their own governments for protection in disputes with the Mexican government. Mexico inserted this clause after repeated experiences of foreign powers using their citizens' business disputes as pretexts for political interference, which tells you a significant amount about Mexico's historical relationship with outside influence. Tipping in Mexico functions with almost the same force as a legal requirement. Service workers are often paid below minimum wage with the structural expectation that tips will supplement their income. Not understanding this as a visitor in Mexico is both economically harmful to workers and immediately catastrophic for your social reputation. Mexico has cultural traditions that have no equivalent anywhere on Earth, and the most extraordinary is Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos in Mexico is a joyful, colorful, deeply loving annual reunion with the dead, where families build elaborate altars called ofrendas decorated with marigolds, photographs, and food to welcome the spirits of deceased relatives back for a visit, and it has UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage status. Lucha Libre in Mexico, masked professional wrestling combining athletics, theater, and mythology, has been part of Mexican popular culture since the 1930s. Mexicos wrestlers wear elaborate masks representing their entire professional identity, and losing your mask to an opponent in Mexico is considered one of the most significant defeats a wrestler can experience. Mexicos muralism tradition produced some of the most politically powerful public art of the 20th century through Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros. Mexico decided that great art belonged on the walls of public buildings where everyone could see it, not locked in galleries where only some people would enter. Frida Kahlo, whose image now appears on merchandise sold in virtually every country on Earth, belongs so completely to Mexico in her clothing, her politics, and her identity that separating her art from Mexico is genuinely impossible. Mexico produced an artist so powerful that her face became a global symbol of creative resilience decades after her death. Mexico receives one of the greatest natural spectacles on Earth every year, the monarch butterfly migration. Every autumn, hundreds of millions of monarch butterflies travel up to 4,000 kilometers from Canada and the United States to overwinter in the forests of Michoacan in central Mexico, arriving in numbers so vast that trees turn orange and gold with resting butterflies, and their wings create an audible hum through the forest. Mexico has the second largest barrier reef in the world, running along the Caribbean coastline of the Yucatan Peninsula. Mexico's Caribbean waters contain whale sharks, the largest fish on Earth, that gather seasonally in concentrations found nowhere else on the planet. The cenotes of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula are thousands of natural sinkholes filled with crystal-clear fresh water that the ancient Maya considered sacred portals to the underworld. Mexico has over 6,000 documented cenotes, connected by an underground river system, making the Yucatan one of the most extraordinary underwater cave networks on Earth. Mexico has produced cultural figures of global significance across every field. Octavio Paz won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1990 for poetry and essays that the Nobel Committee described as passionate writing with wide horizons. And Mexico's film directors Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, and Alejandro González Iñárritu, known in Hollywood as the Three Amigos, have between them won multiple Academy Awards for Best Director. Carlos Slim Helú, born and raised in Mexico, was for several years the richest person on Earth, a fact that sits in interesting tension with Mexico's international reputation. Mexico has produced Nobel laureates, Oscar-winning directors, globally recognized artists, and the world's richest person, and none of this appears in the standard conversation about Mexico. Now the honest section, because this channel never hides complexity behind positive stories. Mexico has genuine and serious problems that any honest discussion must acknowledge directly. Mexico's homicide rate is among the highest in the world, driven by organized crime and cartel activity that has caused enormous suffering to ordinary Mexican citizens who have nothing to do with the criminal organizations operating in parts of Mexico's territory. Mexico's inequality is deep and persistent. Mexico has billionaires among the wealthiest people on Earth and simultaneously millions living in poverty, with a gap between richest and poorest that represents one of the most significant social justice challenges in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico's formal and informal economies exist side by side in ways that official statistics cannot fully capture. Mexico has made genuine democratic progress since the end of one-party rule in 2000. But corruption at various levels of government remains a serious and acknowledged problem. Mexico citizens are among the most politically engaged people on Earth, precisely because they live directly with the gap between what Mexico's institutions promise and what they actually deliver. Here is the final truth about Mexico that demands you reconsider every assumption you brought to this video. Mexico is simultaneously one of the oldest civilizations on Earth and one of the most dynamic modern societies in the Western Hemisphere, where 3,000-year-old food traditions are sold from street carts, outside buildings designed by world-class architects, and where ancient pyramid sites sit within driving distance of a megacity of 21 million people. Mexico gave the world chocolate, vanilla, tomatoes, chilies, avocado, corn, and the concept of zero. Mexico built cities larger than medieval Europe while Europe was still in the Dark Ages, produced Nobel laureates and Oscar-winning directors, and has a food culture the United Nations declared part of the irreplaceable heritage of all humanity. Mexico has more UNESCO heritage sites than the United Kingdom, pyramids larger than those of Egypt by volume, and 21 million people living on top of a lake that is slowly reclaiming what was always its own. Mexico is not the country the headlines describe, and Mexico never was. Subscribe to Untold Facts, because the world is full of countries hiding extraordinary realities behind the stories other people tell about them. And Mexico has been hiding the most extraordinary reality of all right next door to the most media-saturated country on Earth.